On September 6, 2017, the great Cardinal Carlo Caffarra died. It is very reasonable to say from a heart attack, from heartbreak, as happened to the great St. Pius X. He died after taking charge as a pastor of the Church, never resting, of the most serious pitfall, one of the 5 proposed by him rightly judged, against the apostasy in place by ethics and Catholic morality, snares against the doctrine of the Catholic Church, also generated by the ambiguities transcribed in a papal document as Amoris Laetitia. Here we read some passages explaining them. On September 6 last year, Cardinal Carlo Caffarra died suddenly. On the occasion of this anniversary, we propose some brief passages on the corruption caused by moral evil, on discernment and judgment, on the Church in the storm. Corruption and discernment. The lay baptized by faith knows that the world is no longer in the condition in which it came out of the hands of God. It has been corrupted by sin. It is dominated by Satan. The whole world lies under the power of the evil one. The baptized layman cannot fulfill his mission in the world if he does not have a perspicacious diagnostic capacity, an endoscopic ability to see the evil present today in the fundamental human experiences. Let us think, to give just one example, to the corruption that is undergoing the fundamental human experience of sexuality through the proposal to equate homosexual friendship with conjugal friendship. It is not a matter of knowing if the glass is half full or half empty. The category of pessimism, optimism, does not belong to Christianity. It is a true discernment. Judgment and discernment. For faith to generate culture, for the believer to cooperate in the edification of the humanum, it is necessary that he be able to elaborate a judgment on the humanum itself, an interpretative judgment, an evaluative judgment, an interpretative judgment. Understand what is happening, an evaluative judgment, what is happening as it should be judged, positively or negatively. Every judgment, if it is a reasonable judgment, is elaborated in the light of criteria. What are the criteria for judgment? This is what I affirm or deny, that which I affirm or deny, that which is the light for our eyes, is the criteria for our ability to judge. The light of faith gives me the criteria for judgment and purifies my reason, inspiring and governing its activity. The most serious weakness that the Christian suffers today, a real fatal disease, is his incapacity or great difficulty in elaborating interpretative and evaluative judgments of what is happening. The result or the symptoms of this serious illness are the reduction of the faith to a private matter, the acceptance of the fundamental dogma of individualism. I do not cohabitate. I do not resort to abortion. But why do I have to forbid by law another person to do it? This is the style of discernment. This theme has been central since the time of apostolic catechesis. As the writings of the New Testament show, it is the central theme of the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium. It is faith that produces beauty. Faith seems like a small lamp that is about to die out. In such a corrupt society, like a ship without a helmsman and in a great storm, the presence of real, simple, strong witnesses, believe me, is what saves society itself. A boat in the storm. We must be blind as not to see that the Church is going through a moment of confusion and bewilderment. This is not the first time this happens. The Church experienced other of these moments, when it seemed, as Dante says, without a helmsman and in a great storm. The apostles also lived there, when they found themselves in the middle of the lake in a storm of wind and waves, and incredibly, Jesus slept. He had fallen asleep. Sometimes we are tempted to say, Jesus, have you fallen asleep right now? But we know that He is there. This is our certainty. The 5 pitfalls of the Church. The alternative to a church without a doctrine is not a pastoral church, but a church of arbitrariness and a slave to the spirit of the time. Praxis sine theoria coecus in via. The practice without theory is blind on the road, the medieval used to say. This pitfall is serious, and if not one, causes serious damage to the Church, for at least 2 reasons. The first is that being the Sacra Doctrina, none other than the divine revelation of the divine plan on man, if the mission of the Church is not rooted in it, what does the Church say to man? The second reason is that when the Church does not look at this pitfall, it risks breathing the central dogma of relativism. With regard to the worship we owe to God and to the care we owe to man, what I think of God and man is indifferent. Quaestio de veritate, question of truth, becomes a secondary question. The second pitfall is to forget that the interpretative key of the whole reality, and in particular of human history, is not within history itself. It is faith. Saint Maximus, the Confessor, believed that the true disciple of Jesus thinks everything through Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ through everything. I give a very current example. The ennobling of homosexuality, to which we are witnessing in the West, should not be interpreted and judged by taking as a criterion the mainstream of our societies, or the moral value of respect that is owed to every person, which is metabasis eis al genus, that is to say, a passage to another gender. The logical ones would say, the criterion is the sacred doctrine about sexuality, marriage, and sexual dimorphism. The reading of the signs of the times is a theological act. The third pitfall is the primacy of praxis, a pitfall of Marx's origin. I mean the founding primacy. The foundation of man's salvation is the faith of man, not his action. What the Church must worry is not primarily cooperation with the world in large operational processes to achieve common goals. The sleepless concern of the Church is that the world believes in the one whom the Father sent to save the world. The primacy of praxis leads to what a great thinker of the last century called the dislocation of the divine persons. The second person is not the Word, but the Holy Spirit. The fourth pitfall, very linked to the previous one, is the reduction of the Christian proposal to moral exhortation. It is the Pelagian snare, which St. Augustine called the horrendous poison of Christianity. This reduction has the effect of making the Christian proposal very boring and repetitive. It is only God who in his actions is always unpredictable. And in fact, the center of Christianity, there is not the action of man, but the action of God. The fifth pitfall is the silence about the judgment of God, through a preaching of divine mercy made in such a way that it risks to make disappear from the conscience of man who hears the truth that God judges man. Following is a text from the Acts, published by Fides e Cultura of Verona, by the title Catholic Church, Where Are You Going? to express the strong concerns of Caffarra, who had to say to Cardinal Burke, "All this will end in a schism." He pronounced those words on the occasion of the lesson that Cardinal Walter Casper gave to the cardinals in February 2014 in view of the Synod of Family. And the episode is remembered by Cardinal Burke in this book of Acts. And in fact, after the Casper report, the process of confusion in the Church underwent a strong acceleration that is still proceeding to prove that it is not something accidental, but substantial. There are two major themes that form the object of this book of Acts, and which go through all the interventions. The first concerns the laity. In what sense lay people are custodians of a sense of faith, and of an infallibility in believing that gives them the right to be heard in the Church and to even express reservations about the teachings of pastors. The second is in what sense should be understood the plenitudo potestatis of the Pope in the Church, which concretely means if the Pope has internal limits to this fullness of power. Needless to say, these are the fundamental themes that emerged after the presentation of the dubia, after the publication of Amoris Laetitia by the four cardinals, including Caffarra. An element that distinguishes the book is the presence in many reports of Cardinal John Henry Newman, often quoted, whose thinking offers the two issues mentioned very effective opportunities for clarification. In fact, it is he who remembers the crisis of Arianism after the Council of Nicaea, a theme that many compare to today's situation in the Church. Then it was the laity who held true doctrine, while whole synods pronounced themselves for heresy. It is he, moreover, who gives the criterion for the correct understanding of the development of the dogma that can never contradict what the Church has always taught. Finally, it is he who gives the correct interpretation of the role of conscience with respect to the teachings of the Pope in the famous letter to the Duke of Norfolk. Regarding the first theme I referred to above, Cardinal Brandmüller explains well that the laity have a duty to be heard and have the right to speak in the Church. There is an infallibility that pertains to the Church understood as a whole, without distinction, and which constitutes both in rejecting error and in proclaiming the truth. The laity participate in it. The problem, however, is that today the expression of the sensus fidei of the laity is interpreted as what can emerge from a poll, a vote, or a plebiscite. It has become a praxis to anticipate important ecclesial conferences with statements for the recognition of the opinions of the laity. But public opinion does not coincide with the sensus fidei of believers, as it is said that this sensus fidei is characteristic only of the lay experts, since it is of spiritual nature. Brandmüller explains that the difference between the two realities is a lack of contradiction with the authentic tradition. No number turns the opinion into truth, and often are minorities of the faithful to cultivate and defend the sense of faith. The question posed and resolved by Brandmüller is interesting. How should this sense of faith of the laity be expressed? He says, with spontaneous declarations, not with polling surveys or questionnaires to be filled out, but with spontaneous positions, such as the petition that 1 million Catholics sent to the Pope about the issues raised by Amoris Laetitia. These are the forms in which the sensus fidei is manifested today, the faith instinct of the believing people. The other big question mentioned at the beginning, the sense of the fullness of the power of the Pope, is clarified by Cardinal Burke and Valerio Gigliotti. It was not intended as an authority on the very constitution of the Church or its magisterium, but as a necessity for the government of the Church in full fidelity to its constitution and its magisterium. It was given by Christ himself, and not by some human authority or popular constitution, and therefore can be exercised only in obedience to Christ. The fullness of the power of the Pope, given that it comes from God, is limited by natural law and divine law, and therefore any expression of doctrine or praxis that is not in conformity with divine revelation contained in the Holy Scriptures and tradition of the Church cannot configure an authentic exercise of the apostolic or Petrine ministry and must be refused. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.